Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and I owe you an apology. You see, yesterday I released a video going over the recently revealed fan festival dates for Final Fantasy XIV. We'll finally be getting 8.0 information throughout 2026 leading into that expansion. However, with the way that the fan festivals leading up to Dawn Trail went, I had a gut reaction about the potential window of time in which 8.0 could potentially release, with it being or seeming as if it could be as late as May of 2027. But I didn't really base that entirely on facts in front of me. I based that off of feelings and the precedents of the previous fan festivals leading up to Dawn Trail. But that's not all the information we have. So in this video, we're going to go over all the fan fest dates for all of the prior expansions and the release date of the final major patch. Now specifically, I'm going to be looking at 0.5 and not 0.55 or 0.58. I want to know just when they drop the big numbered patch, nothing of the in-between. How long does it take? It's just simpler that way because there are differences between the 0.55, 0.58. There's like minor differences throughout the years throughout that. So we're just going to look at the overall dates. And from there, we will come to a better conclusion about when to actually expect 8.0. This is my apology because I'd rather do something based on fact and not at 6:30 in the morning when I haven't even had my first cup of coffee yet. So first, let's travel all the way back to the Heavensward fan festivals. Now, mind you, these are the fan festivals leading into Heavensward. I know it's a little confusing with the way I wrote it because it may not be 6:30, but I'm still an idiot. So we have fan festivals NA, EU, and JP leading up to Heavensward. These are an anomaly. These I don't think we can use much in the way of statistics. FanFest in NA was October 17th through the 19th. 17th was a day zero. They held a mixer, and it was like a 6-hour line to get anything done there. 18th and 19th were really the event days. 1 week later, they had the EU Fan Festival for 1 day. True story, Soken was on my plane from Las Vegas back to Newark, New Jersey. He took a picture with me and then passed out. I have never seen somebody sleep as soundly as Soken did on that plane. Then, just a month later, barely even, Fan Festival JP happened. We really shotgunned the information that came out of Heavensward. Just super rapid pace, and 7.4 was right around this time. So by 7.4, barely even into it, we had all the information we really needed about 3.0. Obviously, they continue to reveal things through live letters and whatnot as they have over the years, but still, it was pretty surprising. Now, the final patch release before Heavensward, major patch, was patch 2.5, and that was January 20th. Of course, it was split in two. The MSQ was, of course, massively split into that patch, 2.55, so one of the longest, like, singular cutscenes in the entire game. And then it was only about 5 months later where we got the expansion. Heavensward released June 23rd, not counting the early access days, a few days before that, but that's the actual listed release date for it. So not too bad of a wait, about 5 months. That's not including the 0.55 patch in between. Now we move on to Stormblood. Again, these are the fan festivals leading up to Stormblood and the patch release leading up to it. So North America was October 14th and 15th, 2016. JP was December 24th and 25th, straight up a Christmas one, 2016. And EU was February 18th and 19th. This is far more reasonable. As you can see, they decided not to shotgun them all quite back to back, but these are still really close together, only 2 months apart for each of them. NA still keeping to that October-ish date, and JP still keeping that December-ish date, but this time with EU going last. Now, the final patch release actually ended up being January 17th, 2017. That was patch 3.5. And then again, of course, there would continue to be updates after that with 3.55. Stormblood's actual release was June 20th, actually just a few days earlier relative to Heavensward, with the early access being the 17th. So, yeah, just again, about a 5-month release window. Very consistent, very good pattern to have. Now, this is leading into Shadowbringers, so this is not, the leading into Endwalker thing where everything got kind of crazy. This is kind of normal. NA was November 15th and 16th. I remember that being a disaster because, honestly, you're paying Thanksgiving prices around that time to travel, especially traveling back afterwards. And then EU was February 2nd and 3rd, and JP was March 23rd, 24th. I went to that JP Fan Fest, and it was fantastic. I got to meet so many awesome people over there. I did an interview with 4Gamer and Famitsu. I loved it. It was a great time. But still, you can still see it's still like about a 4 or 5 months, 5-month period at this point. So getting a little bit further apart here, but could be due to venues. There's a lot of things that come into that, but still really not that bad of a wait. November to February definitely hurt, but February to March was super easy. That was just like 6 weeks of a wait. Then we have the final patch release, January 8th, 2019, and Shadowbringers released July 2nd. So again, a little bit further. So the final patch was a little bit earlier, and the actual expansion release was a little bit later, but most people wouldn't even notice much of a distinct difference between this. We're talking about a matter of a couple of weeks, so not that big a deal. Here's where things get funky. Leading into Endwalker was a disaster. It's hard to really think so much about this one or put any stock into it at all. Best we can do is include the intended dates, and then the final, it's all kind of meaningless. NA was supposed to be November 6th and 7th, 2020. JP was supposed to be December 19th, 20th, 2020. And EU was supposed to be February 20th, 2021. Not that different from the previous one. In fact, this one, they actually squeezed JP together, again, probably because of venue availability. But none of that happened. As you all know, we ended up having a digital FanFest instead, May 14th and 15th. The only day we can realistically do anything with here is that one. The final patch release came a month before that on April 13th, 2021, with Endwalker's release intended for November 23rd, but delayed to December 7th. So here's where we start to try to think of a pattern, right? It's such a meaningless place to try to start a pattern. But it's still just look at May, look at December. Okay, we've got an intended just over 6 months and then delayed to about 7 months release window between the final FanFest and the Endwalker release date. Okay, in terms of final patch, one more than that, 8 months. But again, Endwalker's kind of an anomaly. It's the lead up to Dawn Trail that sets the new pattern. For those who don't know, Endwalker Patch 6.1, we got a live letter that informed the community that they were going from a 4-month patch cycle to a 4.5-month patch cycle. What they really meant is a 17-week patch cycle to a 19-week patch cycle. It's been 17 weeks for a while. Throughout Realm Reborn, there's some patches that are only like 14 or 15 weeks, and even those kind of felt like forever back then. But then we've been on 17 weeks for long, and now we are on 19. The only exception is either 6.2 or 6.3 was a 20-week patch cycle. And that is the one exception we have. We're concerned about a potential one coming up, but again, that's entirely speculation. Let's stick to what we have in front of us. For Dawn Trail, leading up to Dawn Trail, I probably should have included Media Tour dates, but I guess that's not that relevant. Those are all pretty much in the same place for whenever they did them. NA, July 28th and 29th, I'm sure all of you remember, Las Vegas in July, 2023. EU, October 21st and 22nd, 2023, and then January 7th and 8th, 2024. So there's a wider window between this information. July and August was torture. I was actually in Vegas in October for TwitchCon and had to wake up at like 3 in the morning to cover EU FanFest still all the same. it was a wild weekend. But so now we've got, okay, so end of July to end of August, you've got August, September, October, you've got 3 months. And then end of October to start of January, you basically got, November, December, and then a little bit of time in January. So like just about 2.5 months at that point. So overall, you're realistically not looking at too different of a window from what we had before. And then you go from January 7th to July 2nd. Now, this is where some of the considerations started coming in about where predictions started going. January 7th to July 2nd is very similar to one of our other patch cycles, in case you don't remember. That's actually similar to Shadowbringers, but more specifically to the patch release schedule and not to the actual FanFest. The FanFest here, again, is only about 3 months apart from the final Shadowbringers Fan Festival to the release of Shadowbringers itself. So with that in mind, actually, let's finish this. The final patch release for Dawn Trail was October 3rd, and then the release was July 2nd. That's significant. October 3rd to July 2nd for Dawn Trail. Now, we all knew that Dawn Trail was going to release further down the line. Minimum, you're talking about 2.5 months later than you normally would have expected compared to the previous expansion patch cycles, because you've added 2 weeks to 5 major patches. So yeah, that's automatically going to be an extra 10 weeks on the cycle. Plus, you expect they'll just do whatever they can to actually, put it into a good release window at that. But still, October 3rd to July 2nd. So you now have all of October. So let's just go November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. You've got 8 months in there. It was a brutal 8 months. I can assure you of that. And Endwalker had so many issues. It was a brutal 8 months. So you got an 8 months onto that. So let's look at those two things. We have two expectations. We have the roughly 6 months between the final FanFest and the roughly 8 months between the final patch release. So neither one of these is technically more viable than the other. But if I were to trust one more, it would be the final patch release. Strictly because of all of these dates that have constantly changed around, they always kept fairly consistent about the schedule relative to their normal development schedule. I mean, look, January, June, January, June, January, July, but just like a couple weeks later. And then Endwalker, again, you kind of just have to throw out the window because it was just such a different scenario that I don't know that you can really take it. But even still, those 5 months, let's see, again, April 13th to November. So again, let's just, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and then December. And it's being about the 8 months. So between Endwalker and Dawntrail, with Endwalker, all the issues it had, this 8 month after the final patch release is the one consistent part that the two actually have. And that is still relatable, regardless of the fact that Endwalker's conditions were way different than one another. So now for 8.0, my initial fears were based on specifically the FanFest difference in time. But I didn't at 6:30 in the morning think about the patch difference time. Or I did, but I considered more of what it would look like at the worst case scenario. So let's look at this. We already know April 24th, 25th, NA, July 25th, 26th, EU, October 31st / November 1st for 2026. So not that radically different. You still have the April, honestly, April to July is going to feel good. It's just June, July. It's 2 months. Like, that's going to be great. And then August, September, October, 3 months. So again, you're looking at about a 5 month total time frame between all of this. Now, in terms of patch location, we have to make predictions for this. We know about the 19-week schedule. So my predicted final patch release is between August 28th and May 19th. The reason it's between is because while it's, in theory, 19 weeks and 19 weeks would get us to April 28th, there's a possibility that 7.4 isn't until as late as January 6th. I mentioned that earlier. That is because during the previous year's New Year message, it was said there were 2 major patches in 2025. We've had both of those patches and now have to have the in-between patches. So if that's true, then the December 16th prediction for 7.4 wouldn't hold true. And it may be because of the outrage for Chaotic releasing around Christmas time. And so they may not want to release Savage around Christmas time. Do they need to really do that? No. Will Savage Raiders grown? Yeah. It's a question mark. Like, either way, I'll do whatever I can to get it done. I'll just go hard for a few days and hopefully get it done. And Merry Christmas, everyone. But I think they actually do want to completely avoid Christmas this time after what happened with Chaotic and how memed upon it was. So that could be as late as January 6th, which means that 7.5 would be as late as May 19th if they stick to pattern the entire time and don't have a random 20-week one or whatever, or at least another. Like if 7.5 isn't 20 weeks, but then 7.4 is like those 3 weeks later. Yeah, that's the one variance. That's what it takes into account. So that gives us now our window, that 8-month window. So I specifically counted it out. It's not just 8 months between the final patch release for Endwalker and Dawntrail's release. It was 39 weeks. That's a lot. So I simply added 39 weeks, and you get January 26th to February 16th, depending on what your predicted patch cycle is. That is actually in line with most people's very rational predictions based on Dawntrail being that exact same period of time. And given we don't think they want to go to a 3-year cycle. I know they've said they prefer summer releases, but I mean, again, I said it in the other video, there's just no way for May 2027. Like, the PR would be a disaster. if it happens. The thought of it, with people seeing the FanFest dates and, like me, having that gut reaction. I wasn't the only one who had the gut reaction. I've just decided to try to get some better facts to line things up. It would be wild. Whereas the most consistent thing for the past 2 expansions has been the final patch release to the next expansion. So I'd rather use that as the measuring stick. It gives me a little bit more hope. Now, I'm not saying the expansion will release 39 weeks. That'd be crazy to think it could be so exact. Like, yeah, they're precise, but an expansion release is a lot different than a patch cycle. But I think the idea of Q1 2027 is not actually that wild. And so I think I'll hold in my heart that the theoretical release date of January 26th to February 16th is the more likely thing. Still 2027, not before the end of 2026. I shouldn't have even predicted before the end of 2026. It doesn't make any sense with the July release of Dawn Trail. Literally makes 0 sense. Don't even know why I did that. But that's what I'll go with. Now, of course, the concern is if you were to go off the other pattern, things change a little bit, but they don't even change that much. It looks more like a March release at worst, even if you go by the other pattern of January 7th to July 2nd. You're looking at, yeah, because then it would be, what? You're looking at end of October, so let's just say all of November, December, January, February, March, April. You get as late as April. I still don't think that's good. I mean, how different is April from May, right? Like, for the fears. But again, the most consistent thing is the actual patch cadence leading into the expansion. So, if you were like me and had that initial knee-jerk reaction, that concern, this may help assuage them. Now, that's not going to affect, a lot of people are going to be like, no, still definitely expect the worst. I said that myself. And I think it's safer in this particular case because Endwalker through Dawn Trail has just been a really rough time for Final Fantasy XIV. We don't actually know what their plans are. It's all conjecture, unless it's kind of all meaningless in a sense. At the end of the day, nothing's really going to change for me in the way that I cover Final Fantasy XIV. Doesn't matter how long it is between the patches, I'm still going to cover it. If I have something that I'm concerned about or have fears about, I'll be sure to communicate them. But I think I should try to definitely make sure that if I don't have exact dates on the top of my head, that I maybe don't begin spouting off about how worried I am about a late release, because this looks a lot more like it makes sense than what we actually saw before or what I was stating before. So again, my apologies. That is the last time that I try to do that, because clearly I should have taken a little bit more time to think about it. So just wanted to get a video out talking about this very topic, because it is going to be a major point of discussion for, well, until April, when we have to start thinking about other things. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this video. Just wanted to get something out that was a little more definitive. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned. Like I said, I'll be covering Final Fantasy stuff all the same. Anyway, thanks for watching. And until next time, take care.